Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Jihan Al-Farra, journalist at Middle East Monitor, and today we'll be looking at the devastating floods in Sudan, which have so far killed more than 100 people and destroyed more than 100,000 homes. The lives of more than 500,000 people across the North African country have been affected as a result of heavy seasonal rains in Sudan and in neighboring Ethiopia. And the intensified rains in recent weeks have led to a rise in the water levels of the River Nile not seen in 100 years, a rise of over 17 meters. Now, this resulted in the worst floods ever recorded in Sudan, and the Sudanese government has declared a 3-month state of emergency. Before all of this, the Sudanese people have already been struggling with economic hardship and the coronavirus pandemic as well, among other challenges and political instability. And joining me today from Khartoum, from the Sudanese capital, to discuss the current situation in Sudan, environmental activist and UN Secretary General Youth Advisor on Climate Change, Nisreen Elsaim. Nisreen is also chair of Sudan Youth Organization on Climate Change. It's a youth-led organization, and she has written several policy papers on climate change, renewable energy, as well as gender and youth empowerment. Nice to have you with us, Nisreen.
I'm more happy to be with you today, although I wish the circumstances were better than the situation right now. But I think it's a very key and important thing to let the people know and let the world know what part of the world is struggling right now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. Firstly, can you describe to our viewers the current situation in Khartoum, where you are, and generally in the country following the floods, the level of devastation, and also, is this the first time that you witnessed something like this?
Well, unfortunately, Sudan has 18 states, but now more than 16 states are actually impacted by the floods. Khartoum is the capital, and it's the most well-infrastructured city or state in Sudan. And you can see the massive destruction and the size of the effects of the floods, not only the heavy rain floods, but also Nile floods. And it's very unique this year because the Blue Nile is flooding at the same time as the White Nile is flooding, at the same time as we have floods from the actual heavy rain. So three factors gathered together to leave this tragedy and this disaster for the Sudanese people. Things are actually beyond the description of the words, because I've been in almost 4 or 5 from the affected areas from the floods inside of Khartoum, not outside, and they look very much miserable and everything looks very much destroyed. Houses melted like biscuits in the floods and the heavy raining. Like as you said, more than half of a million are now homeless. But according to the last statistics, actually the number is 19,000, 1900,000. So it's almost a million. Well, the issue is that the Sudanese country doesn't actually have the ability to rehabilitate and rebuild and relieve what the damage happened, and how the government is going to compensate those people who lost their houses. Moreover, we have the academic year for the schools, which was supposed to start on the 26th of this month of September. But due to a lot of destructed schools and houses, and a lot of roads were already cut by the floods, the Ministry of Education decided to actually delay the education of this year until the end of November, which is the first in the history of Sudan. So, as you said earlier, COVID-19 was a very much a huge burden on the Sudanese government and the Sudanese community. Now the floods came to complete everything, while the economy keeps dropping, because not only the political situation, but also because that most of our crops, our economical experts is dependent on the natural resources. It's more likely vegetables, cattle, which is always all destroyed because of the flood. Numbers are estimated in hundreds of millions of dollars of lost capitals, from farms to cattle to actual infrastructure to houses. I think this is a huge disaster, and I think the Sudanese people will not be able to actually recover from this one anytime soon.
Yeah, as you said, the government is struggling, and we know that it is actually a transitional government, and there's quite a lot of instability in Sudan at the moment. But can you describe the efforts of the government as well as civil society and also aid organizations in dealing with this and sort of trying to contain the damage and the disaster that resulted from the floods? I mean, do you feel like enough is being done, or what does Sudan need? What are the people, hoping to see, being done to help them?
Well, the government, one of the most important thing in this new government is that this government is from people and to people, actually. So a lot of government officials and government offices are actually working with the civil society and youth initiatives in order to try to damage control or try to do a little bit more of absorption of the shock from the flood. And people of Sudan, especially the Sudanese diaspora outside, are sending a lot of helps to damaged and affected areas. So they sent humanitarian aid, they sent a lot of clothes, they sent medicines, because as you know, after a flood, we normally have a huge breakouts of cholera, typhoid, malaria, and other waterborne diseases. And that is because most of the system, the sanitation system in Sudan, is not very much advanced, and it's more likely national, local made latrines, which doesn't actually have a system to drain. So when the flood came, everything get mixed together, and this will not only increase the vulnerability of the health system, because the system is already exhausted from the corona, and it was already bad before the corona. So now, even if you want just a normal saline to make a cover or to compensate the water you lose from your body after the typhoid or a cholera or a watery diarrhea, then you cannot find it here. So it's not only the assets, also the health and situation in the healthcare system is very much damaged because of the corona and then the floods. It's also worth saying that a lot of scorpions, snakes actually were living by the Nile, and when the flood happened, they tried to escape inside of the villages. So now we have a very high percentage of injured people from snakes and also from scorpions. So I can easily say,
we've seen images of the houses submerged in water. Is that water being removed at all by any body in the region? I mean, as you said, there are very severe health repercussions for leaving the water to just sort of flow, and the diseases can be quite dangerous to deal with at the moment, especially considering how vulnerable the situation is.
So normally when we have a flood, yes, normally when we have floods, but not Nile floods, it's just floods from the heavy rain, we remove the water and take it back to the Nile. So even if we tried to remove the water, then to where? Most of the roads are cutted. We already have a fuel crisis, so even transportation, the water will be very much big an issue. I think every solution we do this year is not going to be very much effective. The only thing we can do is we evacuate people from wetty areas to more high dry areas, and we try to give them some mosquitoes, and we give every 5 or 7 members of the family one tent to stay in. So everything is very much unsustainable solutions, but I think this is the only thing we have right now. So they are living on the humanitarian aid, from food to clothes, and they are living in a tent just like refugees camps. The only good thing is they are in dry and high areas comparing to their houses and their original areas they are coming from.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we always hear about these recurrent floods in Sudan. Obviously, this year has just been quite unprecedented. You know, we've seen that this is in fact something that has not been seen in Sudan in a century. That's how it's been described by the UN as well. But because it is such a recurring event, you know, floods in Sudan, are there any sort of sustainable solutions for the problem? Any sort of efforts to sort of put in place infrastructure that can combat the situation? What is being done about it, and what do people need to be done about it?
Well, as I said earlier, talking about sustainable solutions for the current situation is not actually applicable because sustainable infrastructure needs actual finance. And the government cannot finance salaries for the teachers, so how can they finance such a huge infrastructure work to prevent such a tragedy to repeat itself? Also, talking about water harvesting projects is a little bit late this year, but we can start planning for next year's. I think one of the most tricky things about climate change and seasonal floods like the one we had is that it's not predictable. Actually, there is very, very little accuracy in the predictions of the floods. For example, that the heavy Nile, Blue Nile, and White Nile flooding at the same time, not mentioning the heavy rain coming from the sky. It's also unpredictable the Nino and La Nino or Nino and Nina effects in the Pacific Ocean are also unpredictable. So a lot of people think is maybe we can invest in some infrastructure to stop such a thing to happen again. But then what is the guarantees that we will have such a flood in the future? And in these hard times, the government actually need every pen to support the basic needs of the people, from the fuel, from the bread, from the daily life things, and the inflation rate keeps going higher and higher. And I think it's a total catastrophe. I mean, everything is actually very much damaged right now.
But what is the solution? What do you think can be done to address this on a more long-term basis? I mean, you obviously lobby and work on climate change, you know, personally, but I'm sure you're also part of organizations, as you know, you're chair of an organization that is working on this issue. What sort of things do you have in mind that could address something like this? What do you think needs to be done, and also on international level, like the international community needs to step in to help Sudan sort of deal with this, because of the lack of infrastructure, because of the difficulties that the government in Sudan is facing, and you know, the severe humanitarian ramifications and consequences for something like this. You know, an entire population is suffering. What can be done to address this, you know, from your point of view?
Well, from my point of view, the most important thing is to have a 3 stages planning system. So the first phase, the planning system, is to actually try to control the damage that we are having right now with the small activities I already mentioned about, like giving mosquitoes, establishing small camps to the people, trying to evacuate people to more higher and drier places until the situation gets better, and try to always give small campaigns about health and water, clean water access and sanitation. Boiling water is a key something in order to prevent cholera and typhoid. So we have to talk to everyone. So to please and to highlight the importance of boiling the water before drinking it or using it for any other thing. It's also very important for the government of Sudan and for example, the Ministry of Health and the WHO together to work in preventing breakthrough of a cholera or a typhoid or a malaria by spraying chemicals and oils or over the pools of the water after the flood is going back a little bit. And also it's very important to prepare a lot of drugs and medicines for the malaria. And it's important also to prepare a lot of campaigns in order to aware people about the correct health sanitation structures to use these days, especially littering in the outspread, which with no latrines and no bathrooms to go to, things will be very hard to control. Yet it's very important thing to do. Otherwise, we will have a health crisis that is much bigger than the economical and the losses in the infrastructure. The second stage of the planning will be how to prevent such an event from happening again. So changing the materials of the buildings, changing the land use, and how we like how we how can I say it? How we change the mapping of the residential areas, and also how we divide the land to be owned by the people is very much key to check first if it's flood bath or not. Also, one of the most important thing to prevent such a thing from happening is water harvesting projects, because believe it or not, we have many flooded areas right now, but we also have areas that suffers from drought and very much thirst. So it's very, as I said earlier, tragedy to have places where we have so much water and another places people suffering from having no water and trying to travel maybe 6 or 5 kilometers by foot in order to get some water for them and their, for example, cattle and their household issues. So water harvesting projects is a key thing. The third stage is having early prediction systems, like equipment for the meteorological system, like a unit for early prediction, like a scientific research center, in order to see if this will happen again and how much big is it, and also in order to look in the previous years, because normally we have flood every 5 to 10 years, but since the 2013 or 2012 we started to actually witness a flood every year, but the tenth of the flood and how the percentage of the water is very much diverse, and the destruction level is also different from year to another. But this year is a remarkable only because of the massive destruction, but it's not a very much different from the previous years. I think our government and the surrounding countries' government should take climate change very seriously and include it into their annual planning and strategies that they put to their countries. And also the regional centers like IGAD, like the African Union and other regional centers that or institutes that deal with different countries should do it, because Sudan is not the only country that suffers from floods this year. India suffered from floods, Niger, Congo DRC, currently Ethiopia is also suffering from floods, South Sudan suffers from floods a lot. Yeah, so a lot of countries are suffering from floods, and it doesn't make any sense to look at the Sudan problem differently or a different perspective, because it's all climate change. The only thing special about Sudan is we are already in a collapsing system, collapsing economy, collapsing infrastructure, and we can't actually take anything more. So when the floods came, they found it already exhausted from the different issues, and it actually was the finishing hit for us as the Sudanese people.
Now, my final question, maybe a loaded question, but how do you feel this, this latest wave of floods will impact the Ethiopian dam situation and the talks, and also on a grassroots level? How do you feel about, the dam and what is going on in that front?
Well, I think the Ethiopian dam can provide a win-win situation for all of us, Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, and other Nile basin countries. The only issue is more studies need to be done to make sure that the impact of the dam is known, and our country, along with the Ethiopian government, can actually plan according to the different environment that the dam will create and the impact of the dam. For example, Sudan weather will be very much humid, and a lot of our crops that we are actually growing right now in the normal situation, because Sudan's normal situation weather is dry, will not be very much applicable, and we need to shift to other crops or other kind of genetic modified, for example, crops. And also a lot of these new integrated diseases will be shown in Sudan, and one of some of the well-known diseases in Sudan will disappear because of the change of the weather. So most of the carriers will not be able to live in the new weather, and also new carriers will be able to live in it. So we will be introduced to a new era of diseases that we did not know before. Also, the areas in the Nile, Blue Nile areas, and especially areas near to the borders with Ethiopia and near to the dam borders, will need to move some of the people in order to protect them if any cracks happened at the dam. Also, until now, the Ethiopian government did not find any insurance company or bank to insure the Ethiopian dam. The Ethiopian dam will hold back more than 14 million cubic meter from the water, and if any cracks or the collapsing happened in the dam, then most of the eastern area of Sudan will be under the water until Khartoum, which is very much big, let me say, big threat to our national security in Sudan. And also big question marks are already there for the impact of the dam. So well prepared reports and studies from the both sides, the Sudanese government and also the Ethiopian government, will save us a lot of time and a lot of effort. Regarding the floods, the Ethiopian dam will have to fill into 5 different years, and we don't have this much of the water the whole year. So they have to also have agreed on rotation when to actually hold water and when not to hold water, in order to make sure for our water security. And because our main basin in Sudan for drinking and for irrigation is currently the Nile.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nisreen, for your insights. Very informative, and also for being with us despite everything that's happening. I wish it were under different circumstances, and I hope the situation will improve in Sudan. Do stay safe. And also thank you to our viewers for tuning in. You can catch up with the next MEMO Live conversation with another colleague next Wednesday. Thank you.